All right, welcome everybody. I wanted to try and record some simple tutorials here on how to do the first project, which of course is using After Effects to do motion tracking. The point of this exercise, of course, is to focus on the 4 different attributes that are involved in tracking inside of After Effects. But the first one, of course, is stabilization. And stabilization is a very powerful tool because it allows us, of course, to take poor footage, cell phone footage, handheld footage, and stabilize it so you can do actual special effects with it, which, of course, we all know one of the secrets of special effects is very smooth footage or no movements at all, especially when we go to talking about the other parts of tracking inside of After Effects, like single point tracking, 2-point tracking, which takes into account rotation and scale, and of course 4-point tracking. But the first thing we want to do, though, if we're going to track something, is we need to make sure that the footage is nice and stable. So what I could basically do here is let me just import some shaky footage. And I've got a bunch of footage here. Let me just find where it's at. Tampa, Spring, and some footage for uses here. And the first piece of footage I'm going to use has actually been filmed. I filmed this, I believe, on a cell phone on a boat. So you can imagine, it's very shaky. It's moving up and down. It's going gangbusters crazy. Let me hit the space. Go ahead and mute. And you see, because it's handheld, it's all over the place, right? Very, very difficult. So if I were to say, want to track something in here, not to mention just make the footage better, I would probably want to stabilize it, right? So I could track something, let's say, onto this boat, like maybe a logo or something as simple as that. And remember, because we can stabilize, we can always then, in post, when we're all said and done, we've done our effects, reshake and randomly shake using like the wiggle tool on the actual composition to recreate this shakiness that we're after. Now, the one thing you're going to notice here is this clip is quite long. It's about 8 seconds from start to finish. Well, the other good thing to remember about stabilization, of course, is that you want your footage to be short. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just crop it here to where that background changes. And this is something to take very, very seriously into account, is that when we stabilize or do any kind of the tracking inside of After Effects, one, again, you want to make sure that the clips are short. So I'm just going to say 15. I'll just do an end point here. That tells me that that is the end. And I may want to go back to my composition settings, of course, and make sure that it starts the time code at 0. That tells me now my clip is, I'll make it a simple example of evenly 6 seconds. Remember, short is better. All right, so here I have my clip. But like I was saying, one of the things we have to take into account when we're actually doing tracking or even stabilization or anything is only working with the actual piece of clip we need. But in order to do that, we need to open a new composition. I'll just leave it at 6. And pull the prior composition into that. This is called nesting. And the reason why we're going to nest is because we want now to only track or stabilize this clip. If I was to stabilize or track this clip, it would do the entire length of the clip, regardless of the fact that I only want this 6 seconds. Now, to do the stabilization, it's an animation process called Warp Stabilizer VFX. And what it's going to do is it's going to start to read that footage. It's going to start to look for things. It actually reads foreground, nearground, and background elements. And it's going to try to find something that is moving very, very little, which would probably be the horizon line. And then it's going to use that to then even out all the footage. You can see I can say smooth motion, or I could say no motion. Now, the difference of smooth motion is it's still going to allow for some rotation, some movement of that camera, but it'll smooth it out and make it less shaky. Well, I want to try to do this so that there's no motion at all. Now, be aware, though, because by saying no motion, we then have to look at the method here. Okay? So right now it's doing the subspace warp, which is going to warp the footage. And it'll actually give you this weird kind of, this weird distortion. I could do position only, which would only stabilize no motion, up, down, side to side. I could say stabilize using position, scale, and rotation. And I could do stabilization taking in position, scale, rotation, and perspective. I'm just going to choose position, scale, and rotation. Now you notice what it did there is it automatically adjusted the borders to a stabilize, a crop, and an auto scale to fill in the gaps. If I were to turn off and just say stabilize and crop, you're going to see how much real estate is actually being lost, how much of my footage is actually getting deleted here in order to stabilize. Because remember, it's focusing on something not moving, so it's going to trim and crop. I kind of like the auto scale because it just scales it up to a proper size. And just like that, you see, it's done. I could even do some advanced functions here in the name of stabilization. See, I want to stabilize, but I can come here and choose whatever, I can even show tracking points if I want to. And I don't know if you can see them there. We can go in and make the tracking points larger. But if you notice, it's created these little crosshairs. So when we're actually doing the process, it's tracking points not moving a lot, and that's what's giving me the stabilization function. So when it comes to, let's say, demonstrating this as a final production, you would probably want to show the original, the tracking point version, and then the stabilized version. I'm going to turn off those tracking points there. Because now, if I tell this to be fit, right, I can hit that button, and you see it's doing its best to prevent any rotation or position in the entire clip. It's minimizing the motion, which makes it look like just a better clip because it looks like I'm actually out there with a tripod or I'm there with a steady camera, and it just makes for better footage. Again, if I were to turn that off to look at the original, again, look at how much motion. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just turn that back on. So I have now a stabilized version, much better stabilized version. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make one more new composition. Because the final result of when we stabilize footage is to show the original clip and the stabilized clip side by side. So to do that, I'm just going to open these up both selected, scale them down. We don't have to worry too much here about let's say 48. And all I'm going to do now is just take a text tool here and say original stabilized. Because we want to show the two before and after. Okay, just like that. All right. Because you'll see now, because we have the two side by side, look at the difference in the quality of the footage. Much, much better having a stabilized version. It's just less shaky and it's just a better quality, even though we've lost a lot of that. But then again, that's why we film now in 8K. So we don't have to, we have a bigger image with which to work with. So all I need to do now, of course, is send that off to the media encoder queue and render it off for the stabilized version of the assignment.